back on the garden transformation project, and I am now clearing off the area behind me. I refer to this area as Patio 2 because there's one at the top near the house, there's a walkway down the side here, and then this is Patio 2, which is behind me. It's going to be a porcelain patio, as I might have said in other videos, but this area at the moment is all very uneven, and there needs to be a 50 to 80 mil layer of hardcore on top of this area, but it needs to be nice and level first, and then hardcore, and then we're going to whacker plate it down. So there's a lot of work that needs to go into making this area nice and flat, and I've got my dad and my uncle here helping me again to basically clean the area off and get it nice and level. When you're starting a project like this, one of the most important things to start with is preparing your sub base correctly. And what I mean by that is making sure that it's the right height and it's nice and flat and ready to take the MOT1. Depending on the landscape that you're working with, you could find that you have to remove a lot of material. And if you're going to do that, definitely get yourself a machine. Some form of digger or excavator is going to help speed this process up. And at the end of the day, you can save your back, because shoveling all of that material is going to be very hard work. Back when I demolished the house extension, I thought to dump all of the old building materials like the brick in this place in the garden, so that I would have a really strong sub base when the time comes to build a patio. Unfortunately, I dumped too much of that waste material here, so the heights weren't quite right for what I was aiming for. I was actually needed to have a sub base of MOT of 100mm plus, but because most of my sub base is made up of house bricks, I can afford to go 80mm to 100mm. So that's another day done. There's a little bit of cleaning up to do and putting away the tools and what have you, but behind me, as you can see, all of the groundwork has been done. Cleaning off this area, ready for a big delivery of MOT1, which will then be whacker plated down, ready for what will be a porcelain patio. As always, I'll keep you guys posted on the progress. Hey guys, I've just finished work early on a Friday. It's probably about 2:30. The sun is out, which is a big change from what it's usually been like. And I'm just going to do some DIY groundwork, which is basically getting the woven ground sheeting down and then shoveling a load of MOT1 onto that sheet. This is what I'm working with at the moment. I've just dumped this here, and I'm just going to basically get a sheet over the whole lot and then start getting some of this MOT spread out over it, and then hopefully get another big delivery of MOT to just put right on top of that. Brickwork tomorrow. So as you can see in this video, there are two types of woven membrane that I've got down on the floor. In fact, the one that I'm unfolding right now is the thick woven membrane, which is used for landscaping. And the other one, which is underneath the MOT, you can just see there at the front of the video, is actually a weed control for flower beds. So it's a lot thinner, and I did buy the wrong stuff to begin with. So it's good to point out that there are two types. This type that I'm putting out now is a huge sheet. It comes in 4.5 meter lengths by whatever length you want. So for my garden, it was 4.5 meters by 8 meters. All I had to do was shovel the MOT1 from the big dump that I put down there earlier, and then just put it over the new woven membrane. I personally love doing this type of work. It's so physical and manual that at the end of the day you always feel really good for what you've done, and not only that, you can see the visual change too. When I started this project, I thought that this woven membrane was to stop weeds coming through from underneath and then through your patio. What it's actually for is to stop the migration of materials. So that's to stop the dirt and the clay coming up through the MOT1 and maybe making it unstable. By this point in the project, I am starting to get used to bricklaying. I've had quite a bit of experience now on DIY projects. Obviously, I've done the brick salon, I've done the house extension, and I've done the brick planters and steps at the top of the garden. This here, what I'm building, is just a retaining wall for what is going to be the MOT bed. So I realized that I needed to build up the wall slightly around the outside to make sure that the MOT had something hard to sit up against. I'm aiming for that 100mm bed of MOT, so this wall was a really important thing to build. I did a lot of preparation on this area in 2023 where I put the footings in for these walls, which is roughly a 500mm deep by 300mm wide, so it's perfect for a single skin wall. This is probably the DIY way of doing this build, but essentially I've tied my string line to an existing wall and I'm using a string line level, which is essentially just a bubble which sits on the level and gives you an idea of what is level. So that gives you an idea of how to do a level wall but also straight, because you're keeping the edges of the brick lined up with the string. Then you can go across it later or whilst with a spirit level, as you can see here, just to make sure that everything is perfectly in line. So everyone's project is different, and you might be thinking at this point, wow, that brick wall looks very messy. And I agree, it does look a bit messy, but I know that this is going to be underground, so it doesn't really matter what it looks like. The key thing for me here is to make sure that all the joints are filled with mortar, and as you can see on the left side of that wall, there's a lot of extra mortar down the side of the bricks. That's there on purpose. I want to make sure that these bricks are absolutely solid. There's going to be some pressure given to this wall by the planter, which will be on the left. This wall will be built quite a bit higher. There's probably another 4 courses of stone which will go on top of that wall. The hardcore is down and I've been whackering it with the whacker behind me, and we're just using this piece of wood, which is nice and straight, to just level it off and then put a spirit level over the top. To set the final height of the patio, I'm using 2 pieces of rebar by banging them into the MOT and tying a brick line around both of them, and then spin the rebar to get a nice taut brick line, and then measure down from the brick line to the MOT1. So this is day 2 of the porcelain patio laying. I didn't film the first day, I should have. but I was just too busy and too focused on getting it right, and because I'd never done it before, it was just taking all of my concentration. Plus I'm making videos for other platforms as well. So yeah, I've got this this porcelain patio down behind me. As you can see, there is a bit of an issue because although the sky's blue, it's very cold. It's below 4 degrees, so mortar doesn't set below 4 degrees. So I'm putting some accelerator in the mix today, which should hopefully help, well, and frostproofer, so it should hopefully help set this. And I know that in the middle of today, the temperature is going to be above 4 degrees, so we should be good to go. So I'm going to start cutting some porcelain, which I haven't done before, and just start laying. So when I started this project, I felt like I was given so many horror stories about cutting porcelain slabs. Like they're extremely hard to cut, very time consuming, quite expensive because you need expensive equipment. So I was prepared to hire a big tile cutter that I could run these slabs through and get perfect cuts. But before I wanted to spend all of that money, I just had to have a try with my DeWalt grinder and a standard diamond cutting disc that I actually bought from Aldi. So this is me giving it a go with that disc. As you can see, I've measured half of the slab, which is the cut that I needed to make. I then put a piece of timber down the line that I wanted to cut. That stops me veering off and catching the face of the tile in other places. I used a clamp on the wood to ensure that it didn't move as well. As you can see, I'm wearing goggles and I'm also wearing a mask as well. This is a very, very dusty thing to do. You want to be making sure that there is some water on the porcelain slab, unlike what I've done here, because it creates so much dust that even when you're wearing a mask, you're going to get covered in it. So eventually I ended up putting my hood up because I just didn't want my hair to be covered in porcelain dust. Another thing to note is that I've rested this slab on 2 pieces of wood. I've done this because I don't want to be going through the slab and cutting into the material below. It gives me a little bit more height too, so I can move the slab very easily with my hands. After doing a lot of these cuts, the advice I would give if you're going to be using a grinder just like me is to just take your time. Don't force the grinder into the porcelain slab. Just let the blade do the cutting and it'll eventually go through. It is a bit time consuming, but that way you're not going to ruin your battery as well on your grinder, and it'll last a lot longer, and your cuts should be nice and smooth too. And this is one little tip: if you're using a grinder like me, this is my 18 volt DeWalt grinder, and on the back of it I've got the 54 volt FlexiVolt battery. And I've done that because when you use a bigger battery like that, not only does it last for longer because it's bigger, but it also gives the grinder more power. And the more power means that the grinder itself isn't struggling as much to make the cut. Because it's not struggling as much, it's not draining the battery as fast. So you really do get so much more time, working time, with a big battery like this one. Let's talk about what probably is the most difficult part of the Porcelain Patio project. You're going to need to be making a 5-to-1 mix between sharp sand and cement. The way that I do this as a DIYer, and I think this is the way the professionals do it too, is that they use a builder's bucket, so it's just a standard size bucket, and then they put 1 bucket of cement in and 5 buckets of sharp sand in. There's a couple of different ways you can mix up this mix as well. You can use a cement mixer or you can do it on a board. My advice, because of the sheer quantity of mortar that you're going to have to make for this project, is to hire a cement mixer. That's going to make things so much faster, and it's going to make the mix a lot better too. I'm aiming for a 30 to 40 mil bed of mortar. That's going to give it the strength to make sure that it doesn't crack in the future. I can't stress enough how important it is that you need to be paying attention to how wet the mortar is. So in my project, I made 2 different types of mortar. I made a really dry mix and I made quite a wet mix. Both were terrible. The first one, which was really dry, was very difficult to level the slab afterwards. I would hammer it in place and it just wouldn't budge. And the second mix, which was very wet, as soon as I put it down, it would start to sink, and I was worried that I was going to start losing the levels of my patio. Unfortunately, this is something that comes with experience, but if you try and focus on getting a mix that's not too stiff and it's not too wet, then you should eventually get there very quickly. So it's about 2 o'clock and the progress has been pretty slow, if I'm being honest. Had a little bit of trouble with the mortar at the beginning, and I think that's just because we were using the accelerator and we hadn't used the accelerator before, so it just changed the consistency of the mortar mix and made it a bit too sloppy. And because it was sloppy, it was like coming up between the joints and going onto the face of the porcelain slabs. So we've made it a bit harder, and as we went along with the slabs behind, we got dig at a bit quicker. So but like I say, it's about 2 o'clock now, so hopefully we'll be able to get a few more in before the sun starts to go and we need to call it a day. So due to the time of year, we're always struggling for daylight and the temperature is dropping, so it's not like I have time to do a lot of filming on this porcelain patio, which is a shame. But I've done a lot more today. As you can see, I've added in 2 more rows, although this third row isn't quite finished. The temperature is dropping and we are losing the daylight. So it's just an update at the end of the day of what I've been doing. I have learned today though, with this being the second day I've ever done porcelain patio, that getting the bed right, the preparation of the bed before the slab goes down, is absolutely essential. If you get that right and it's nice and level and smooth, when the slab goes down you only have to tap it a little bit with the mallets just to get it perfectly level with the surrounding slabs. So I'm really happy with what I've done today. I feel like I've learned a lot, and I think the next day we tackle this, we'll get a lot more done than we have done on the previous 2 days. See you then. One thing that you're really going to have to get your head around if you're doing a DIY project like I am, these big projects take a lot of time, and that's very difficult to get your head around because, you know, you'll want to get it finished but the weather's getting in the way. You've got a really difficult living condition, even you've got a very difficult living condition, and having children in that condition as well is even harder. So get your head around that, and if you can do that, you can progress your projects, but slowly, just like I've been doing here. So I've got some of the porcelain patio laid, and it's time to put the next row in. But to do that, I've got to remove some of the mortar down here, just on this edge here, just with the angle grinder, just to basically, so I've got a nice clean match up for the next row of porcelain slabs. It's going to be really busy today. Don't know if I'm going to be talking to the camera much, but hopefully we can get a lot done. So to get the height of the mortar bed absolutely perfect, you can use a piece of timber with the thickness of the porcelain slab cut out of it. This part of the video is sponsored by Rock Unique. They have provided all the porcelain patio slabs for this project. They're called Magnesio and they are a beautiful cream colour. They have many other options on their website and they stock so many beautiful materials. If you're interested in the products that they stock, please go and visit their website. You will not regret it. You can find a link to their website and to these particular porcelain slabs in the caption for this video. And once I'm happy with the level of that mortar, I then use a rake to give it some lines. I do this because it brings the surface of the mortar up slightly and gives us some play when I place the porcelain slab on top. It means that you can press into that full bed. Please be aware this is not something I've ever seen a landscaper do, it's just something that I found worked well for me. So at this point I'm just putting the plastic clips in. These are the clips that help you level up the patio. Personally, I feel like most of the leveling is done by you and the mortar bed, but these clips are useful to have. I didn't have one of the expensive suction pads to place these slabs down. That's no problem at all. You don't need one if you're doing this as a DIY project. The only thing that it does cause is you to get some mortar or the SBR on your gloves, which can then transfer onto the face of the slab. So you might want to just keep a bucket of water nearby just to keep your gloves free from any excess mortar or SBR. There are two ways of putting the SBR onto the back of the porcelain slabs. You can either use a brush, like I was doing earlier in the video, or you can use a trowel. I wanted to try both ways. Landscapers say that if you apply it with a trowel, it's a lot thicker, and because you've got a thicker, wider coverage, then there is even less chance that these tiles could pop from the mortar bed. Well, that's the end of another day on the porcelain patio, and I've got to say, this patio lane is very hard work, but it's rewarding because what's left is something really quite beautiful. So today you can see all that is just clay, but you can see that we've laid all those there, this whole row just down there, and because we're going to carry on another day, I've put a couple of brick ties in to make sure that we could tie in to the next few rows of porcelain slabs. Morning guys, welcome back to the final day of the porcelain patio, which I am so excited to finally finish this project. There's only a small amount of slabs left to lay, so I'll show you what I'm looking at. As you can see, there's just a small gap here now that needs to be filled. I'm going to leave a small gap as well for some aggregate down the side. Plan to have aggregate there and along there as well. It's going to look amazing when it's done, and it's looking fantastic already. I think the obstacle that we've got to overcome today, which is the first time we've had to do any serious cutting on this project. We had a couple of cuts on the side where we would have the staggered patio effect, but it was only widthways, and there's only a few cuts to make. However, in this video I need to be cutting long ways down the porcelain slab, and there's at least 8 slabs to be cut that way. So I'm going to try out some blades. I'm going to see how well it goes, and hopefully we can polish the edges to make sure that those slabs do look good when they're down. I do advise anyone doing a project like this to buy the buffing pads for the grinder. Once you cut through your slabs, you're going to have a really sharp edge on the porcelain. If you use those buffing pads, you can make that nice and smooth, and that's going to be good because aesthetically it will look a lot better, but also it won't be as sharp and there's no chance of cutting yourself. And that's the end of the final day of the porcelain slab laying. Honestly, it's been a journey. I'd like to say it's fully finished, but it isn't. There's one more thing to do, and that's to add the grout. Now, I haven't fully made up my mind which grout I'm going to be using for this project, but I'm very happy with the outcome of these porcelain slabs. I'll show you what I've been up to, and you can see the final finished patio right there. Obviously these were the ones that we put in today, and the sun came out especially. I seem to have a track record of finishing a project and the sun comes out just as I finish it. I don't know if that's pure coincidence or just fate, but I've got a big smile on my face, and the last thing I need to do is grout, and that's it. A porcelain patio that I've laid without doing anything like this before. I'm just so excited. Thanks for watching.